Hello, this is Dale with foodoffensive.com, and I have been covering a little bit on GMOs here the last couple videos, and I continue to do that here. So without further ado, this is that video.
And welcome back. GMOs at Whole Foods have become a hot topic of debate as of late, and I actually have this very short piece I'd like to read from the official Whole Food Market blog. It reads, "Some products in our store do contain GMOs, just like any food store in the country." And for the relevance of such a topic, we will turn now to Mr. Aaron Dykes. Aaron.
Hey, how you doing, Jakari? Great to talk to you.
Doing good. Now, we see this this statement by Whole Foods saying that they carry GMOs, but so does everybody else. So what's the relevance of Whole Foods carrying a GMO product?
Well, for people who don't know the Whole Foods store, they've become the biggest advancers of organic produce. All their marketing is aimed towards the fact that they have purely organic foods. But, you know, they're a grocery store, so they have to make other foods available as well. Now, the larger problem is that GMOs have infiltrated our food supply so much. They've got 90% of all corn coming from purely GMO sources. Same with soy, same with cottonseed oil, and same with canola. And they put byproducts of that corn, the canola, the soy, in all kinds of foods, pancake mixes and breadings and just anything you find off the shelf. So there's a lot of GMO food ingredients in Whole Foods, even though they have definitely made an effort to push for organic foods. Now, the problem, though, is there's been pressure behind the scenes. They're clearly trying to clamp down on the organic market as Monsanto continues to try to take over the market. And we're really looking at a cornered beast with Monsanto. You've got a lot of people in America who've woken up to the dangers of GMO. You've got videos like Jeffrey M. Smith's video, a lot of studies, research that's been done. We just saw the big GMO corn study showing that it does cause tumors in rats when they do a long-term study instead of just a short-term study.
Right.
So there's a lot of really bad dangers with GMO. People's lives are at stake over this issue.
Now, before we get too far into this, GMOs are genetically modified organisms, or things that are made in the laboratory, most famously by companies like Monsanto. Like you said, they have corn and many other crops. So can you tell us a little bit about the GMO process and why these things are dangerous?
Well, they've got genetically modified, basically bacteria strains that they change certain traits in that they think will produce something they want. The most popular GMO crops are pesticide resistant. They're designed so you could spray copious amounts of Monsanto's Roundup on them or other herbicides, and the plants will resist it and continue to grow, and it will kill all the other weeds. Now, the problem is we end up eating that pesticide, or in another variety of the same crops, they produce their own pesticide. Either way, we end up eating a lot more pesticide, the environment sucks up a lot more pesticide, and the plants themselves mutate over time, as do the insects that come across them, and so on and so forth. It's really this larger playing with God issue. And the bottom line is our bodies have learned to process certain kinds of foods, have learned what the body wants over thousands of years, and there's little codes inside the DNA of the different particles of food, and that interacts with the body in a certain way, and we're just looking at new varieties of food the body isn't used to, it doesn't know how to produce, and that's why we're seeing allergies crop up in all new numbers, different kinds of diseases, new autoimmune and digestive disorders. All these things are springing up, and the numbers are skyrocketing as we see GMOs introduced into our food supply.
Now, speaking of allergies, there's an article that just came out, I believe it was today, Natural News, Mike Adams. They posted something talking about GMO cows, how they've cloned these cows to produce genetically modified milk that are supposed to be allergen-free, or at least have a reduced number of allergens in them. I'm sure they have a bunch of other stuff. They say even in the article they claim that the cow that they cloned was born without a tail. You know, so maybe it doesn't have any allergens, but probably has other things in there that can harm you and your family.
It's really creepy what they're doing with this stuff. Even if it wasn't physically dangerous to us, it's still a really bad practice because of the monopoly and because we don't want to eradicate natural supplies of food and livestock and so forth. We don't need purely synthetic breast milk. We probably should just promote mothers still producing breast milk for their own children. That seems like a common sense approach, but the fact is it is causing a lot of physical harm. And Monsanto and the other biotech firms know this. They know that consumers don't want to eat GMOs. They've done different studies on the degree to which people avoid buying GMOs when it's labeled, when they're informed. That's why Monsanto's been working so hard to keep mandatory labeling away from the American consumers so that we don't know what's in our food. And that's why it's a big issue right now in California. You've heard about Prop 37.
Yeah, so which requires them to put mandatory labeling of things that are genetically modified.
Right, and you've got a lot of organic advocates fighting against it, saying they want to see Prop 37 approved, they want to see it become law. You've got Monsanto, you've got Pepsi and Coca-Cola, other people producing genetically modified organisms. They've spent in excess of $25 million opposing Prop 37, trying to make sure this does not become a precedent in the U.S. or anywhere else around the world. And they've also got all these newspapers lined up preaching how horrible it would be if we just had to label food, if consumers had to know
that'd be such a hassle to read an extra line saying that, hey, this is a genetically modified organism. That'd be so terrible. But speaking of the Proposition 37, in this Whole Foods blog here that they released, they even list their support for Proposition 37. So do you think that that does anything to put a kinder, gentler face on Whole Foods that they do support Proposition 37?
Well, Whole Foods is becoming its own controversy because they've been for decades the leading advocate for organic foods. They've been against genetically modified foods in many ways. They've helped put it on the shelves. All that's great. But in recent years, there's been political pressure, and, a lot of the critics within the organic foods movement have begun calling attention to that, questioning their motives, and they've posted a lot of that evidence. I've started looking into it, and that's why we're here today, because Organic Spies is one of the groups that tried to put a spotlight on Whole Foods' practices, questioning what they did. So they did a hidden video. They went into Whole Foods stores in California, knowing that Prop 37 was coming up and wanting to point out the fact that Whole Foods has not donated financially to Prop 37, even though they've been promoting it in theory. Okay. And they further are trying to expose the fact that there's so many ingredients that contain or may contain GMO ingredients that are sold at Whole Foods. So they talked to different employees, and that video went up. It was an interesting expose. It was starting to go viral. Mike Adams, other people on the internet wrote about it. We ran the story a few days ago. Whole Foods knowingly engages in massive GMO deception, says undercover video by Organic Spies. Right. And they made their argument. Maybe they're right. You could decide for yourself if you could watch the video. The problem is they pulled that video today.
Yeah. YouTube, and you guys can see it right there on the screen. This video has been removed.
It has. And so then Whole Foods followed up on that video by officially responding to it on their blog. That's what you were reading from just a minute ago. And they admit that they do have ingredients with GMOs. So debate over. They sell GMOs. They are against GMOs in many respects. They promote organic foods, and we should support them where they're doing that. But we have to call out the fact that there's a lot of deceptive labeling going on. Chief among that is this whole sub-movement where a lot of products are now labeled natural. They'll say natural peanut butter, natural this. Sounds like it's probably organic. Sounds that way. Yeah. But actually, natural is just a buzz term that allows them to put pretty much any ingredients in there. And, there's probably a few things that don't fall under natural, but there's no regulation for these labels, and that's the big problem.
So there we see a mislabeling, or at least a kind of a misinformation campaign, to where you pick up, let's say you get some natural peanut butter, makes you think that you have some nice, wholesome peanuts and sugar and maybe some other things in there, but you don't expect any genetically modified organisms. But what you're saying from your research is the term natural doesn't mean too much when it comes to food labeling.
Yeah, it's become a specifically deceptive term. And I mean, working families, who has time to sit there and read every ingredient? I've tried to make a practice of it myself, but even when I get used to a product, I start reaching for it on the shelf the next time I'm there. And months later, if they change it, am I still reading that label? It's a good question, but the reason we're talking about Whole Foods is because they have been proponents of GMO labeling, but they haven't backed Prop 37, and the question is why. And a lot of people point to a meeting that happened a year and a half ago with the USDA, that's the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Okay. The head of that under Obama is Tom Vilsack. He used to be the governor of Iowa, which, as you know, is the largest corn-producing state in the nation. Most of that corn is now GMO. So there's a huge Monsanto-oriented biotech GMO lobby based in Iowa. They clearly have influence with people like Tom Vilsack, and we're going to go through a lot of those articles. But a year and a half ago, there was a big debate over whether or not to deregulate, in other words, to allow Monsanto to grow genetically engineered alfalfa. Now, that's a crop they feed to a lot of livestock. Humans eat it too, but it's mainly used to feed the animals that we later eat in these stores. And so if you're feeding them genetically engineered foods, should there be a label required for that? That's part of the debate. Now, Whole Foods, along with several other big organic labels, went to this meeting. They agreed to sit down at the table with Monsanto. They agreed to sit down with Tom Vilsack of the USDA in order to do a compromise deal, what they called a coexisting.
Right.
And they had reasons to believe that this was a good position because they were told they would not consider an outright ban, that basically one way or another Monsanto and the other companies, DuPont among them, would be allowed to grow alfalfa. And that opens the door for so many other crops. So they had great expectations going into that meeting. Maybe they had the right intentions. But it turned out USDA won't impose restrictions on biotech alfalfa crop. That was in the Wall Street Journal. So they decided they're going to abandon a proposal to restrict Monsanto. That went through, and this led to Ronnie Cummings. He's from the Organic Consumers Association and other organic associations looking closer at Whole Foods, criticizing their connections, in particular the alleged coziness between Tom Vilsack, who again is the Agriculture Secretary here in the U.S.,
right,
his cozy relationship with Monsanto, and the allegation that they've been personal friends, that there's been campaign contributions. You see this headline, Organic Elite Surrenders to Monsanto. Now what? Yeah. And it talks about the disappointment of why would they compromise when they've been fighting so hard on this? Exactly. And again, why aren't they supporting Prop 37 now when Monsanto and the other players have put so much money into killing that bill when it could be a very helpful bill for the very things Whole Foods have been fighting for?
And you guys can see the article right there on the screen, the Organic Elite.
You've got Whole Foods CEOs disappointed about that USA decision on alfalfa. Walter Robb is one of them. He's the co-CEO of Whole Foods. And so when did Whole Foods begin to get pressured? Alex pointed out on air today there was SEC filings against Whole Foods' other CEO, John Mackey. He had written some comments anonymously online targeting other organic competitors, and they brought an antitrust lawsuit against him, told him basically that they were considering prosecuting him full-time. That hasn't happened, at least yet. That was back in 2007. But you see in Forbes, you see in New York Times that they began to inquire Whole Foods' chief. So is that when they began to bend on Monsanto? Is that when they began to give in to some of the pressure? Well, we don't know all the answers, but those are important questions. And then, so I started looking into the campaign contributions.
Okay. Follow the money.
Follow the money. I looked up John Mackey. We'll get to him in a minute. But I also looked up the co-CEO. His name is Walter Robb. He's been with the company for 20 years or so, since 1991. He's based in California. He's been a big Democratic contributor. I don't mind that. That's not who I support. We're going to get into how Barack Obama has bent over backwards for Monsanto and the biotech industry. So did Romney 20 years ago. So did Clinton. So did both Bushes. So it's a real problem. Our whole government has been bought out. So, but he did donate to Barack Obama. But the one that's even more striking is that he donated to Christy Vilsack. Christy Vilsack is the wife of Tom Vilsack, the USDA Secretary of Agriculture we were just discussing, who's got this long relationship with Monsanto.
There you go. You see it right there on the screen. So Six reasons why Obama pointed.
Why would Walter Robb donate to someone who has done everything to destroy the organic movement and roll over to let Monsanto have a monopoly in this country? Why would he donate to that guy's wife?
Good question. What else you got in your stack?
Well, we got some supporting stuff. This goes back to when Obama was coming into office. It's Meet Monsanto's #1 lobbyist, Barack Obama. Okay. Now, among the people he put in his cabinet were Michael Taylor. He used to be a vice president for Monsanto. Before that, he was a lobbyist for Monsanto. Before that, he was a lawyer for Monsanto. He's been with Monsanto and related companies for many years. Okay. And Obama put him in as food safety deputy czar of the FDA. This guy is in charge of our food safety regulation. You've seen the study since you've been here. I don't know if you were paying close attention to GMO before you started working here.
I knew of it. I didn't know how deep the rabbit hole went, so to speak. But you got a guy from Monsanto That they bring, okay.
You've got all these studies showing that Monsanto's GE crops may be dangerous, harmful to your health, causing tumors in rats.
Yeah.
And here's this guy from Monsanto in our government supposedly regulating through the FDA.
Yeah.
Well, you know he's just rubber stamping for their policies. Even if you want to be objective, it's hard not to when you know people personally.
Yeah,
that's why there used to be codes of ethics for not having a conflict of interest. Meaning you can't serve two masters. Nobody could serve two masters. So there's Michael Taylor at the FDA, hugely questionable figure. And again, we have Whole Foods co-CEO Walter Robb donating politically, financially to the wife of Tom Vilsack, who Obama also appointed. And he's been involved in all kinds of things. Here's one article, 6 reasons why Obama appointing Monsanto's buddy, former Iowa Governor Vilsack for USD head would be a terrible idea. And it gets into his support for pharmaceutical crops. It gets into how he's a friend of biotech bullies pushing GE drugs in corn crops. That's where they were growing herpes virus treatment, AIDS virus treatment, all open air in Iowa. There's a big controversy over that. I wrote an article on it, just looking back at the fact that circa 2002, you had escaped, admittedly cross-pollinated, diseased GM maize that was growing pharmaceuticals.
Wow.
And it was mixing with the food supply. There was some minor fines. It was fine.
Minor fines, yeah, that's exactly what they
Tom
did.
Vilsack has also been involved in clone meat and all kinds of stuff with Monsanto, with the other biotech people, and there's no way somebody like Walter Robb of Whole Foods wouldn't be aware of those issues, wouldn't find them important. The fact that he's donating to the wife of Tom Vilsack is extremely troubling because he has to be one of the most informed people on this issue.
Wow.
I mean, he's been involved with it for 20-plus years.
Well, Aaron, in the short time we have left, do you have a few more articles you'd like to run through?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to point out how much this has pervaded the entire government at the executive branch. It is in no way just Obama, although he's been completely subservient to Monsanto and the others. It just came out that Romney's first project with Bain back in 1997 was promoting Monsanto as they entered the biotech field, as they began to do genetically modified crops. By the way, you got John Mackey supporting Mitt Romney financially. That's also in these listings right here. I don't know if you could see that on camera. And Gary Johnson, that's fine. I'm not against these people donating money to candidates if they want to support them.
Sure.
But why would someone so high up in the organic movement be supporting these terrible candidates?
Yeah.
And then you got this article, does Monsanto man Mitt Romney secretly eat organic? Now, this
I wouldn't be surprised.
He does, and it gets into how he and his wife are obsessed with this stuff. But, you know, Alex and I covered this in that mini documentary, New World Order, Blueprint of Mad Men,
Sure.
How all these elite people pushing GMO crops on the entire world, Bill Gates among them, David Rockefeller, all saying everybody's got to eat this stuff. It's good for the earth. This is how we're going to feed the world. They all obsessively avoid GMO. And this article gets into how that was true of Clinton, his family, while they were in office. It was true of George W. Bush when they were in office. And right here in the world, according to Monsanto, you see footage of George H.W. Bush, along with Dan Quayle, getting GMOs fast-tracked, approved in the government, getting them to bypass the ordinary FDA regulations, lowering the regulations. And you see footage of him inspecting some of this pharmaceutical-grade GMO crop. And you're telling me these people don't know what's going on? They do know.
They have their own private garden at the White House.
Yeah. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about, but they put in these Monsanto people in the regulatory positions, and ordinary people have to eat this GMO crud, which, again, the studies suggest could be causing cancer, sterility, a hidden sleeper, third-generation sterility where it doesn't show up until your grandchildren.
Wow.
This is epidemic-level stuff, and we're not being told the truth about it. There's a cover-up at the top, and the organic elites, the presidential elites, everybody else, they are avoiding the GMOs. By the way, there's one more article.
Sure.
GM food banned in Monsanto canteen. The scientists don't eat the GMO food that they produce at Monsanto.
I don't know if you guys can get a shot of that or not, but...
So that's just a little bit down the rabbit hole for you. This research is endless. I'm not the most perfect presenter of it, but I assure you the information is there.
It's another solid report from Aaron Dykes. This is a great eye-opener. I learned a lot of stuff just sitting there and listening to you. And like you said, genetically modified food is banned at Monsanto. They don't even eat their own food that they produce. So we see another incredibly in-depth report from Mr. Aaron Dykes, and we'd definitely like to thank him. We encourage you at home to read these articles, check them out for yourselves, make sure that everything he said was accurate. I'm sure you will find that is the case. So that's it for the InfoWars Nightly News. I want to thank Aaron. I want to thank Richard Belzer. Congratulations to Melissa Melton for that great piece and giving all our support to those in San Antonio fighting for the RFID freedom. And I'm Jakari Jackson for the InfoWars Nightly News. Subscribe to PrisonPlanet.tv. Check out the InfoWars story. We got great videos like The World According to Monsanto and Genetic Roulette. So check out all that. Planet InfoWars, subscribe, write your articles, and maybe you'll get them featured right here on the InfoWars Nightly News. And I'm Jakari Jackson. You have a good night.